He found two alien sisters freezing in the snow. Now they both want to be his wives. Elias Mercer had learned to respect silence on ice worlds. Silence meant survival. Wind howled, storms screamed, machines broke, but true silence meant something was wrong. He was checking a perimeter sensor when his wrist unit vibrated. The signal was weak, broken, and almost buried under static. Elias frowned. No ships were scheduled in this sector. No colonies. No reason for a distress signal to exist at all. He turned his head toward the endless white horizon. Snow fell in slow, heavy sheets, swallowing sound and distance alike. The temperature readout blinked red, deadly cold. Any unprotected life would last minutes, maybe less. Probably a glitch, he muttered, but his feet were already moving. Elias was a human surveyor sent by Earth to catalog fringe worlds for future expansion. Ice planets were cheap, unwanted, and dangerous, which meant they were usually assigned to people like him. People without powerful families. People who didn't complain. He followed the signal on his wrist unit, pushing through knee-deep snow. His insulated suit hummed as it fought the cold, but even with advanced tech, the planet punished carelessness fast. After 15 minutes, he spotted something dark against the white. At first, he thought it was wreckage. Then it moved. Elias broke into a run. Two shapes lay half buried in snow, their outlines wrong for any species he knew. They were tall and slender, with pale blue skin that blended dangerously well with the ice. Long silver hair spilled across the ground like frozen threads. Their clothing was torn, thin, and completely unsuited for this world. They were alive. Barely. Elias dropped to his knees, brushing snow away with gloved hands. Their skin was ice-cold, their breathing shallow. One of them stirred weakly, her eyes opening just enough to see him. They were not human. Elias froze for half a second. First contact protocols screamed in his head. Observe, retreat, report. Then one of them coughed, a thin, painful sound, and her hand twitched toward her sister. Elias swore under his breath. Protocols can go to hell, he said, already lifting them. They were lighter than they looked. Too light. That worried him even more. He activated an emergency heat field and wrapped both aliens inside it, lifting them carefully against his chest. His suit protested, power levels dipping, but he ignored it and turned back toward his shelter. The walk back felt endless. Wind battered him. Snow tried to steal his footing. His muscles burned as the extra weight dragged him down. Twice he nearly fell. Each time he adjusted his grip, shielding the sisters from the worst of the cold. By the time his shelter came into view, Elias' warning alarms were screaming. He sealed the hatch behind him and collapsed to the floor. Warm air flooded the room. Elias dragged the sisters to the medical bay, laying them gently on the treatment table. The auto-scanner beeped, confused by unfamiliar biology but still able to identify basic problems. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, internal damage from prolonged cold exposure. They shouldn't be alive, Elias whispered. He removed his gloves and began manual warming procedures, guided by the med unit's limited suggestions. He adjusted heat levels slowly, carefully. Too fast would kill them. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, one of the sisters gasped sharply, her chest rising as her body fought its way back from the edge. Her eyes opened fully this time, glowing faintly with a soft violet light. She looked straight at Elias. There was fear there, confusion, but no hostility. Her lips moved, forming words he didn't understand. "It's okay," Elias said quietly, even though he knew she couldn't understand him either. "You're safe." The other sister stirred soon after, coughing weakly. She reached for her sibling's hand, gripping it tightly. Their fingers intertwined instinctively, as if letting go would mean death. Elias stepped back, giving them space, though he stayed close enough to help. The med unit beeped again, this time more optimistically. They were stabilizing. Only then did Elias allow himself to breathe. Hours passed. Outside, the storm worsened. Inside, the shelter hummed steadily, lights casting soft shadows on unfamiliar faces. The sisters slept deeply, their breathing even now. Elias sat nearby, sipping rehydration fluid and watching them. They were beautiful in a strange, alien way, but that wasn't what held his attention. It was their markings. Fine lines along their temples and necks, glowing faintly like frost under moonlight. He had seen similar patterns once before in classified files marked extinct species. His stomach tightened. "No," he murmured, "that's not possible." If he was right, then the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. One of the sisters woke first. She sat up slowly, alert despite her weakness. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. When they landed on Elias, she stiffened. Elias raised both hands slowly, palms open. "I won't hurt you," he said, speaking calmly. "You were dying out there, I brought you here." She watched his mouth as he spoke, then tilted her head slightly. After a moment she spoke again, her voice soft but clear. The words meant nothing to him. Elias tapped his wrist unit and activated the translator. It struggled, searching databases, then finally produced a rough match. "You saved us," the device translated, uncertain. Elias nodded. "Yes." Her eyes widened. She looked at her sister, who was now awake and listening. They exchanged a glance filled with something Elias couldn't read. The first sister placed a hand over her chest and spoke again. "I am Selari," the translator said. "This is my sister Valen." "I'm Elias," he replied. "Human." Their eyes widened again at that word. "Human," Selari repeated slowly. Valen pushed herself upright despite a pained hiss. She looked at Elias with intense focus, as if trying to memorize him. "You risked yourself," Valen said after a moment, "for strangers." Elias shrugged awkwardly. "That's normal for us." The sisters exchanged another look, this one sharper, more serious. Selari spoke carefully. "You pulled us from death. You warmed us with your own life energy." Elias blinked. I just used a heat field." "That is not the point," Valen said. Her voice carried weight despite her weakness. "By our laws, this act is not small." Elias felt a strange chill that had nothing to do with the cold outside. "I didn't do it for laws. I just didn't want you to die." Selari studied him quietly. Then she bowed her head, a deep, formal gesture. "We owe you our lives," she said, "and more." Elias shifted uncomfortably. "You don't owe me anything, just rest. You're still healing." Valen smiled faintly. "Humans truly are as strange as the old stories claimed." "Stories?" Elias asked. But before she could answer, alarms sounded softly through the shelter. Elias turned toward the console. Orbital scan detected multiple energy signatures. Ships, not human. Elias felt his pulse spike. Selari followed his gaze and went very still. "They have found us." "Who?" Elias asked. "Our hunters," Valen said quietly, "or our executioners." Elias clenched his jaw. Outside, the storm raged on, hiding the shelter beneath layers of snow. But in orbit, something ancient and powerful had awakened. And all Elias could think was one simple, stubborn thought. "Not while I'm still breathing." The alarm continued its low, steady pulse, filling the shelter with quiet urgency. Elias moved to the console, his fingers flying over the controls as he pulled up the orbital feed. Grainy sensor data showed 3 ships holding position above the planet's atmosphere. Their shapes were sharp and unfamiliar, built with angles that spoke of purpose, not comfort. "They are not attacking," Elias said, more to calm himself than anyone else. "Yet." Selari sat straighter on the medical table, her expression controlled but tense. Valen's hand tightened around the edge of the bed. "They will wait," Selari said. "They always wait. They believe fear weakens the mind." Elias glanced back at them. "You said hunters. Why would anyone hunt you?" Valen's gaze lowered for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady but heavy. "Because our kind was not meant to survive." Elias frowned. "That doesn't make sense." Selari looked at him carefully. "To the galaxy it does." Elias returned his attention to the console, sealing external vents and boosting thermal masking. The shelter sank deeper into the snow, its systems adjusting automatically to hide heat and signal output. It would not stop a determined search, but it might buy time. "How long do we have?" he asked. Valen tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something beyond human senses. "Hours, perhaps less." Elias exhaled slowly. "Then we talk. I need to know what's going on if I'm going to keep you alive." The sisters exchanged a look, silent communication passing between them. Finally, Selari nodded. "Our people are called the Elari," she began. "We were once leaders, mediators between species. Where we walked, wars ended." Elias turned from the console and leaned against the wall, listening closely. "But peace makes enemies," Selari continued. "Others feared our influence. They claimed we controlled minds, bent fate, lies but repeated often enough they became truth." Valen picked up the story. "A coalition formed, quietly at first, then openly. Our worlds were erased one by one." Elias felt a knot form in his chest. He had read reports, ancient conflicts, lost civilizations, always framed as necessary. "You were declared extinct," he said softly. "Yes," Selari replied. "That was the goal." Elias looked at them with new eyes, not just survivors, targets. "So why you?" he asked. "Why hunt you now?" Valen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because we are not only survivors, we are heirs." That single word seemed to hang in the air. Elias straightened. "Heirs to what?" Selari's markings glowed faintly, reacting to her rising emotions. "To authority. To memory, to bonds written into law older than most stars." Elias rubbed his forehead. "Okay, that explains why they want you dead, but it doesn't explain why saving you dragged me into this." Selari looked at him directly. "Because you did not merely rescue us, you claimed us." Elias blinked. "I didn't claim anyone." Valen shook her head gently. "Not by your understanding, by ours." She stood slowly, ignoring Elias' instinctive step forward to help. Though weakened, she held herself with natural balance. "Our culture is built on bonds," Valen said. "Not ownership, responsibility. When a life is saved at great cost, a bond is formed. The one who saves becomes an anchor." Elias stared at her. "An anchor to what?" Selari answered quietly. "To us, to our fate." Elias let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "I was just doing what any decent person would do." Valen smiled faintly. "That is what makes it powerful." The shelter lights flickered briefly as external sensors recalibrated. Elias checked the feed again. One of the ships had launched probes spreading across the upper atmosphere. "They're searching," he said. "Systematic sweep." Selari stepped closer to him. "Elias, you must let us go." He turned sharply. "What?" "If they find you sheltering us, they will not stop with us," Selari said. "They will mark you, your species." Elias crossed his arms. "So your solution is to walk back out into the storm and die?" Valen met his gaze. "If that saves your people, yes." Elias shook his head immediately. "No, that's not happening." Selari studied his face, clearly trying to understand. "You would risk your entire world for 2 lives." Elias didn't hesitate. "I didn't start this, but I won't finish it by handing you over." There was a long silence. Then Selari bowed her head again, deeper than before. "By the life bond code," she said, "we acknowledge your choice." Elias sighed. "You keep saying that like it means something terrible." Valen smiled, this time with a hint of something almost amused. "To our enemies, yes." The probes descended lower. One pinged close enough to cause a faint vibration through the shelter's walls. Elias powered down non-essential systems and switched to manual controls. "We can't stay here," he said. "They'll find us eventually." Selari nodded. "Agreed." Elias pulled up a terrain map. "There's an old ice canyon about 20 kilometers north, deep, unstable, full of interference. Sensors hate it." Valen's eyes lit with understanding. "A place hunters avoid." "Exactly," Elias said, "but the trip will be rough." Selari placed a hand over her chest. "We can endure." Preparation was quick and quiet. Elias packed portable heat units, food, and emergency beacons. He adjusted suits for the sisters as best he could, modifying human gear to fit alien forms. It wasn't perfect, but it would keep them alive. Before leaving, Elias paused and looked around his shelter. Years of solitude, research, and routine. He knew, without saying it, that he might never return. He sealed the hatch behind them and stepped into the storm. The wind hit like a wall. Snow reduced visibility to almost nothing. Elias led the way, following his navigation markers while shielding the sisters as much as possible. The terrain shifted constantly, ice cracking underfoot, slopes turning treacherous without warning. More than once Elias slipped, only to feel a steadying grip at his arm. Valen was stronger than she looked. Hours passed in painful, freezing silence. Elias' muscles screamed, his breath coming in harsh bursts. Still, he kept moving. Above them, unseen, the hunters searched. At the canyon's edge, the ground dropped away into darkness. Wind screamed upward from below, carrying shards of ice. Elias activated climbing anchors and began the descent. Halfway down, a distant rumble echoed through the ice. Solari's head snapped up. "They have detected movement," Elias cursed under his breath. Faster. Lights appeared above, cutting through the storm. Energy pulses scanned the surface. "They won't follow us down," Elias said, more hope than certainty. "They will," Valen replied, "because of you." Elias glanced at her. "Because of me?" "You changed the equation," she said. "You showed choice where there was none." They reached the canyon floor just as a beam of light pierced the snow above, scanning the descent path. Elias pulled them into a narrow ice tunnel, natural and winding. The walls glowed faintly with trapped light, ancient and beautiful. They moved deeper until the noise of the storm faded. Only then did Elias slump against the wall, exhausted. Solari approached him slowly. "Elias, there is something you must understand." He looked up. "What now?" "Our laws speak of anchors not only as protectors," she said, "but as equals." Valen joined her. "When we said we owe you more, we were not speaking lightly." Elias closed his eyes for a moment. "One crisis at a time." Valen smiled softly. "Very well, anchor." Above them, the hunters waited, and for the first time in centuries they were uncertain. The canyon swallowed sound and light alike. Deep below the surface, the ice walls curved inward, forming a natural shelter where even advanced sensors struggled to read clearly. Elias sat with his back against the frozen stone, breathing slowly, forcing his heart to calm down. Every muscle in his body ached. Solari and Valen stood a short distance away, their eyes adjusting to the soft glow of their markings, which lit the tunnel just enough to see. "They will not leave," Solari said quietly. "Not yet." Elias rubbed his hands together, trying to restore feeling. "Good. Because neither are we." Valen tilted her head, listening again to signals beyond human hearing. "They are arguing." "Arguing?" Elias asked. "Yes," she replied. "Your presence complicates things." Elias gave a tired half-smile. "That seems to be a theme lately." They moved deeper into the tunnel system, following natural bends and narrow passages that opened into a wide cavern. The ceiling rose high above them, ice layered over ancient stone. Strange crystal veins ran through the walls, faintly glowing as if reacting to their presence. Elias stared. "This place, it's not natural, is it?" Solari nodded. "It was shaped long ago by our people." Elias felt a strange weight in his chest. "So this world wasn't empty." "No," Solari said. "It was hidden." They reached the center of the cavern. Symbols were carved into the ice-covered stone, old and worn but still visible. Valen stepped forward, placing her hand against one of them. The glow in her markings brightened and the symbols responded, lighting up softly. The cavern hummed. Elias instinctively stepped back. "What did you just activate?" "A memory," Valen replied. "And a signal." Elias' eyes widened. "A signal to who?" Solari looked at him. "To anyone still listening." The ground trembled slightly, not enough to be dangerous, but enough to remind Elias that this place was not just a cave. It was a message left behind. "You're calling others," Elias said. "Won't that bring more enemies?" "Yes," Scifi answered honestly, "but also allies." Elias exhaled. "You really don't do things halfway, do you?" Valen smiled. "Neither do humans, it seems." Time passed slowly. The cavern stayed quiet, but the tension never left. Elias checked his portable scanner repeatedly. Above them, the hunter ships remained, their movement cautious now. "They're waiting for something," Elias said. "For you to make a mistake," Scifi replied. Elias frowned. "They could just bombard the area." "They won't," Valen said. "They fear what lies beneath the ice." Elias looked around again, seeing the symbols, the crystal veins, the strange sense of age in the air. "What exactly did your people leave here?" Scifi hesitated. "Truth." Before Elias could ask more, his scanner beeped sharply. A new signal appeared, short-range, encrypted, and unmistakably human. Elias froze. "That's impossible." "What is it?" Valen asked. "A human ship," Elias said slowly. "Military frequency." Scifi's expression tightened. "They followed you." "No," Elias said. "I didn't send anything. Earth doesn't even know I'm in trouble." The signal strengthened. A voice came through, crackling but clear. "Unidentified ground party, this is the UNV Horizon. We are detecting anomalous energy readings. Identify yourselves." Elias stared at the device like it might explode. "Great," he muttered. "Just great." Scifi stepped closer. "You must answer." Elias shook his head. "If they see you, this turns into a diplomatic nightmare, or worse." Valen's voice was calm. "Elias, hiding us from your own kind will break the bond you claim to value." He looked at her sharply. "I didn't claim any bond." Scifi met his gaze steadily. "You chose us. That is enough." Elias closed his eyes briefly, then opened a channel. "UNV Horizon, this is civilian surveyor Elias Mercer. I am alive. I am not alone." There was a pause, then, "Repeat last. You are not alone." Elias swallowed. "I am sheltering non-hostile extraterrestrial survivors. They are being hunted." Silence followed. Heavy, charged silence. Finally, the voice returned, more controlled now. "Elias Mercer, you are instructed to stand by. Do not engage. Do not move your position." Elias almost laughed. Too late for that. Above them, the alien ships shifted formation. Energy levels spiked. "They are reacting," Valen said. "Your people have changed the board." The cavern trembled again, stronger this time. Ice cracked in the distance. Scifi's eyes widened. "They are preparing a containment strike." Elias swore. "They're going to collapse the canyon." "They believe it will bury us," Valen said, "and erase the problem." Elias moved instantly. "Then we move. Now." They ran deeper into the cavern as the ground shook harder. Chunks of ice fell from the ceiling. The air filled with sharp cracks and echoing booms. Elias followed Scifi through a narrow passage just as part of the cavern behind them collapsed. Dust and ice filled the air, cutting off their retreat. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller, circular, with a smooth floor covered in symbols. Scifi stopped abruptly. "This is a sanctum." Elias had no time to ask what that meant. The ground shook violently. The hunters were not being careful anymore. Valen stepped into the center of the chamber. "Elias, listen to me." He looked at her, breathless. "Now is not a great time for speeches." "This is important," she said firmly. "You must understand what they fear." She placed both hands on the symbols. Light surged upward, filling the chamber with a soft, blinding glow. Elias shielded his eyes. The light formed images in the air, cities, worlds, meetings between species. Elari standing between armies, stopping wars without weapons. "They did not fear our strength," Scifi said, her voice echoing. "They feared our influence." The image shifted, councils turning hostile. Accusations, fear spreading. "We offered unity," Valen continued. "They chose control." The images showed destruction, worlds burning, the Elari falling. Elias felt a deep anger rise in his chest. "They wiped you out because you wouldn't let them dominate." "Yes," Scifi said. "And because we refused to rule." The light dimmed. The chamber shook again. Elias looked at them both. "So what does this have to do with me?" Valen stepped toward him. "You are human. Your species is young, unpredictable, and stubborn." Elias snorted despite everything. "Fair. You value choice," Selari said. "Consent, you saved us without asking what you would gain." Elias' expression hardened. "That's just being decent." "Exactly," Valen replied. "Decency is rare." A loud crack echoed above them. The ceiling began to split. Selari moved quickly, activating another symbol. The chamber responded, a shield of light forming overhead, holding back falling ice. Elias stared. "You could do this the whole time," Selari shook her head. "Only here, only once." The human ship's voice crackled again through Elias' device. "Elias Mercer, massive energy spike detected beneath the surface. Are you responsible?" Elias hesitated, then answered. "No, but I'm standing in the middle of history." There was a pause. "Say again." "Just don't fire," Elias said. "Please." The alien ships above changed formation again, weapons charging. "They are afraid," Valen said softly, "because now others are watching." Elias clenched his fists. "Good." The shield trembled as another impact hit. Selari turned to Elias, her expression solemn. "If we survive this, nothing will be the same. For you, for us, for your people." Elias met her gaze. "It already is." Valen smiled, not with humor but with respect. "Then hear this clearly, Elias Mercer." She placed her hand over her heart. "By choice, not law, we bind our fate to yours." Elias opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the trust. "All right," he said quietly. "Then we do this together." The shield flared brighter as explosions echoed above. The hunters hesitated. And across the ice world, buried beneath centuries of silence, the galaxy began to remember the Elari. And humanity was standing right beside them. The shield above the sanctum shimmered and pulsed, thin lines of light running across its surface like cracks in glass that never quite broke. Elias could feel the vibration through the soles of his boots as distant impacts struck the ice above. Each one sent a sharp echo down through the chamber, a reminder that time was running out. Selari stood with both hands pressed against the symbols, her face pale but focused. Valen moved around the chamber's edge, watching the walls, listening for changes in the structure. "They are testing the shield," Valen said. "They do not want to destroy what they do not fully understand." Elias swallowed. "That's comforting, in a very worrying way." His wrist unit buzzed again. The human ship was still there, holding position just beyond the alien fleet. The fact that they had not opened fire yet was the only thing keeping this from becoming a disaster. "UNV Horizon to Elias Mercer," the voice said, quieter now. "We are observing hostile maneuvering by unknown vessels. Explain." Slowly. Elias took a breath. He chose his words carefully. "Those ships are hunting the two survivors with me. If you intervene without understanding, you could trigger a wider conflict." There was a long pause. "Survivors of what?" "Genocide," Elias said flatly. Silence followed, heavier than before. Selari glanced at him, her eyes showing surprise and something like gratitude. Valen gave a small nod. "You speak plainly," Selari said. "That is a human trait." Elias kept his eyes on the device. "It's also a desperate one." The ground shook again, stronger than before. A thin crack appeared in the shield, light flaring as it repaired itself. Selari gasped softly and adjusted her stance. "They are increasing power." "They believe we are running out of strength." "Are we?" Elias asked. Selari did not answer right away. That was answer enough. Valen moved to Elias' side. "This is the moment where choice matters most." Elias looked at her. "I feel like you say that a lot." "Yes," she replied calmly, "because many species avoid this moment, humans do not." Another tremor rippled through the chamber. Small fragments of ice fell, skittering across the floor. Elias keyed his wrist unit again. "Horizon, listen to me. Those two are not weapons. They are diplomats, peacemakers. If you fire, you will prove their enemies right." The response came slower this time. Command is divided. Some believe intervention is necessary. Others advise observation. Tell them this, Elias said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Right now, the galaxy is watching how humans respond to fear. Valen's eyes softened slightly. Above them, the alien ships shifted formation again. Energy readings spiked, then stabilized. They were hesitating. They expected humans to panic, Solari said quietly, to either flee or strike. Elias clenched his fists. We do both sometimes, but not always. The shield flickered again. Solari stumbled, catching herself on one knee. Valen rushed to her side. That was too much, Valen said sharply. You cannot hold it much longer. Solari nodded, breathing hard. I know. Elias looked around the chamber desperately. There has to be another way. A signal, a broadcast, something that makes them stop. Valen's gaze drifted to the glowing symbols beneath their feet. There is one. Solari looked up sharply. No, that is forbidden. Valen met her sister's eyes without backing down. It was forbidden because we feared misuse, not because it was wrong. Elias frowned. I'm missing something important, aren't I? Solari struggled to her feet. This sanctum can project truth, not opinion, not manipulation, memory. Elias' heart skipped. To who? Solari's voice was quiet. To everyone. The chamber shook violently, throwing Elias off balance. A DEEP Chinese letter crack echoed as part of the ceiling gave way, slamming into the shield. The light flared blindingly bright. Solari cried out and nearly collapsed. Valen caught her. That's it, Valen said. One more hit and it fails. Elias looked at the symbols again, then at the sisters. If you do this, what happens? Solari met his eyes. Our history becomes known, our destruction, and the lies told about us. And the hunters? Elias asked. They lose their excuse, Valen said. But they may not forgive. Elias nodded slowly. Sounds familiar. He tapped his wrist unit again. Horizon, I need you to trust me. Something is about to happen. Do not interfere unless fired upon. The reply was tense but clear. Understood, Elias, for now. Elias turned to the sisters. Do it. Solari searched his face, as if making sure this was truly his choice. Then she nodded. Valen stepped into the center of the chamber and placed both hands on the largest symbol. Solari joined her, their markings flaring brighter than ever. The chamber hummed, the sound deep and resonant like a heartbeat. Light poured upward, not stopping at the shield but passing through it, through the ice, through the planet itself. Above the surface, the light erupted into the sky. The alien ships recoiled, formation breaking as sensors overloaded. On the human ship, alarms blared as systems struggled to process the sudden data surge. Across space, receivers activated. Relays woke. Archives opened, and the truth spread. Images filled the air above the ice world. Not projections, but shared memory. Elari mediators standing between warring fleets, treaties signed, weapons lowered, then fear, accusations, secret meetings, orders given in shadows, worlds burned, children hidden and hunted. Silence imposed by force. On the UNV Horizons bridge, officers stared in shock as the data streamed in. This was not propaganda. It was raw, verifiable memory, impossible to fake. They were telling the truth, someone whispered. Above the planet, the hunter ships froze. They are panicking, Valen said, her voice strained. Their control depended on secrecy. The shield flickered violently, then shattered in a burst of light. Ice and stone crashed down around the sanctum, but the main chamber held. Solari collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Elias rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Solari, she lives, Valen said quickly, though she looked barely steadier herself. But she cannot continue. The chamber fell silent except for distant rumbling. Elias cradled Solari gently, his jaw tight. Then it's my turn. Valen looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Elias stood, lifting Solari into his arms. I mean hiding is over. He activated his wrist unit and opened a wideband channel, overriding civilian limits. His signal jumped from the human ship to every nearby relay still awake. "This is Elias Mercer," he said clearly. "Human surveyor. I am sheltering Elari survivors. I confirm the memories you have received are real." On the human ship, stunned silence. On the alien ships, chaos. Elias continued, his voice steady. "They came to me freezing and hunted. I chose to help. If that makes me an enemy, then you can add humanity to the list." Valen stared at him, something fierce and proud in her eyes. The response from the horizon came fast and firm. "Elias Mercer, UN command acknowledges receipt. Stand by." One of the alien ships powered weapons again, but another moved between it and the planet. "They are divided," Valen said softly. "The truth has split them." Elias let out a slow breath. "Good." The human ship shifted position, placing itself clearly between the hunters and the planet. Weapons did not charge, but shields flared to full strength. "UNV Horizon to all parties," the captain's voice echoed across open channels. "Any hostile action will be considered an act of aggression against human lives." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, one alien ship powered down its weapons. Another followed. The last hesitated, then retreated, jumping to faster than light with a flash of distorted space. Elias sank to one knee, relief washing over him so hard he almost laughed. Valen approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You stood where many would not." He looked up at her. "I just didn't want anyone else to die," she smiled softly. "That is how history changes." Above them, the storm began to fade. The war was not over. The galaxy was still dangerous and uncertain, but something fundamental had shifted. Humanity had chosen to stand between the powerful and the hunted, and the stars had noticed. The days that followed were quiet in a way Elias had never experienced before. Not the lonely quiet of an empty ice world, but a careful, watching silence, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The UNV horizon remained in orbit, its presence steady and protective. No more alien ships returned. The storm clouds thinned, revealing a pale sky that reflected endless white across the frozen land. Deep within the canyon, the sanctum lay broken but peaceful. The symbols no longer glowed. Their purpose had been fulfilled. Selari slept for 2 full days. Elias stayed close, barely leaving her side. Valen watched him with a calm understanding, offering food, adjusting heat levels, and guiding him when he pushed himself too hard. When Selari finally woke, she did so quietly. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then settled on Elias. "You stayed," she said softly. Elias smiled, tired but genuine. "I told you, I don't leave people behind." Selari's lips curved into a faint smile. "You should know many would have." She tried to sit up, and Elias gently helped her. Valen moved closer, relief clear in her expression. "The truth has spread," Valen said, "across councils, across worlds." Selari nodded slowly. "We can feel it. The weight has shifted." Elias leaned back against the ice wall. "What happens now?" "That," Selari said, "depends on humanity." Above them, on the bridge of the UNV horizon, human officers argued quietly but intensely. Data streams continued to arrive from across known space. Old records were being reopened. Long-dismissed warnings were suddenly taken seriously. The Elari were no longer ghosts. "They want to speak to you," the Horizon's captain told Elias later that day, when a secure ground-to-orbit link was established. "Both of you." Elias glanced at Selari and Valen. "Diplomats?" Selari shook her head gently. "Witnesses." The meeting was unlike anything Elias had imagined. It was not held in a grand chamber or formal hall, but through a shared projection, linking human command with representatives from several alien powers who had responded to the memory broadcast. Faces filled the air, some familiar, most alien. Elias stood slightly forward, unsure of his place. Selari and Valen stood beside him, calm and composed. A human admiral spoke first. "Selari, Valen, on behalf of Earth, we acknowledge the truth of what was shown." Selari inclined her head. Acknowledgement is a beginning. An alien representative spoke next, their voice sharp with restrained emotion. Your people were declared manipulators, liars. Why did you not fight? Valen answered evenly. We did, with patience, with trust. We lost. Elias felt a quiet anger ripple through the gathered presence. And now? The same representative asked. Selari looked at Elias before answering. Now we choose differently. Eyes turned toward the human. Elias cleared his throat. I'm not here to lead anyone, he said plainly. I'm just a surveyor who found two people freezing and did what felt right. A murmur spread. But, Elias continued, if humanity has a role to play, it should be simple. We don't decide who deserves to exist. The human admiral nodded slowly. That principle has guided us before, at great cost. Selari's gaze softened. And at great strength. The meeting ended without treaties or declarations, but something more important had happened. Lines had been drawn. In the weeks that followed, the ice world changed. Human engineers landed carefully, building a small, respectful outpost near the canyon. Not a base, a sanctuary. No weapons were placed within it. Other ships arrived. Not hunters, observers, some cautious, some curious, a few openly ashamed. Selari and Valen moved freely among them, speaking when asked, silent when not. They never demanded justice. They simply told the truth. That was enough. Elias watched it all from the edge, still struggling to understand how his quiet life had turned into something so large. One evening, as pale light stretched across the snow, Valen joined him outside the shelter. You are restless, she said. Elias chuckled. I was supposed to map ice and rocks, not rewrite galactic history. Valen smiled. History is rarely rewritten by those who seek it. They stood together, watching the distant horizon. There is something we must discuss, Valen said gently. Elias sighed. I was afraid you'd say that, she laughed softly. Not fear, understanding. Selari joined them, moving more slowly now but with steady strength. Our people's laws are old, Selari said. They were built in a time when survival demanded rigid bonds. Elias nodded. You've mentioned that. When we spoke of anchors, of binding fate, Valen added, we spoke from habit. Selari looked directly at Elias. But habit does not rule us anymore. Elias felt a quiet relief he hadn't realized he needed. I care about you both, but I won't cage anyone, not you, not myself. Selari smiled warmly. That is why we choose you. Elias blinked. Choose me for what? For friendship, Valen said simply. For family as humans understand it. Selari nodded. Not obligation, not law, choice. Elias laughed softly, tension finally leaving his shoulders. Yeah, I can do that. Time passed. The hunters did not return. Some of their allies withdrew quietly. Others faced investigation. Old power structures weakened. A new phrase began to spread through diplomatic channels, first as a curiosity, then as a standard. Human warmth. It was used to describe unexpected mercy. Stubborn defense of strangers. The dangerous habit of seeing individuals instead of categories. Elias returned to Earth months later, not as a hero but as a witness. He refused medals, declined political roles. He testified, told his story, then walked away. Selari and Valen did not remain on Earth. They traveled carefully and openly, helping rebuild what had been lost. They did not reclaim thrones. They built bridges. Sometimes, when the stars were quiet, Elias received messages, simple updates, new friendships. Hard days and hopeful ones. He kept his old survey jacket, patched and worn, a reminder of the cold world where everything changed. Years later, a new generation of humans would learn the story not as legend, but as lesson. That strength did not begin with weapons. That power did not require domination. That one human in a storm chose to carry strangers instead of turning away. And because of that choice, the galaxy became a little warmer, one quiet act at a time.